TUZ 420 Tatarin is one of the best pure scouts in the game. 8x8 all-wheel drive, always on diff lock, short front and rear overhangs, and a large fuel capacity. But it's not unstoppable. Here lies mine, damaged and defeated after a punctured gas tank exploring the abandoned factory in Lake Covs. I'm happy I had the Tatarin for the obstacle course that the factory is. Even though the factory is a bit cramped, it handled climbing the pipe stacks like a champ. I definitely had one of the better scouts for the job. But the Tatarin shares a weakness with its real-world counterpart, the BTR-80, in having a relatively low ride height. And not even on anything tricky, just the curve leaving the factory, I managed to rupture the fuel tank. In this video, we're going to explore the Tatarin a bit more, comparing it to its real-life cousins and seeing how a typical journey in the Tatarin goes. While I load up my Dan 93 to bring the Tatarin some much-needed repairs and fuel, let me tell you about the vehicles the Tatarin is based off of, the 1980 BTR-80 and the GAZ 59037. There's a lot of debate, mostly across Reddit, what the Tatarin is actually based off of, but this model is the one I felt like I was finding the most people agreeing it was close. The GAZ 59037 is a modified Russian BTR-80 amphibious armored personnel carrier. They get converted into civilian and service vehicles such as fire trucks. This model I found on the Steam Workshop actually gives a decent idea of how these are converted, with the darker portion on top being added to the BTRs to give much more room to the interior and exchanging the armored covers for windows. Being as the BTRs are still in service by the Russian military and a few others, finding certain information was a bit difficult. For instance, I can tell you that the converted GAZ has a 260 horsepower turbo diesel V8, but I can't seem to find out how large the engine is. But using information about the BTRs and the GAZ, we can make some educated assumptions to learn a few more things about the Tatarin. For instance, the Tatarin is obviously bulletproof, being as it's an armored personnel carrier, having enough armor to protect from small arms fire pretty much all around, at most 9mm and at the least 7mm. The BTR's engine is in the back, so there's no rear hatch door like on a lot of armored troop carriers. The main two doors for embarking and disembarking are these two narrow doors on each side which split in the middle, where the bottom half acts like a step while the top half swings out. Despite the Tatarin's rather roomy interior, it seems that it only has the potential to hold 5 rear passengers, while the BTR could hold 3 operating crew and 7 passengers. We'll explore the interior of the Tatarin later. For now though, our repairs and fuel just arrived. With a patched and full tank, we're ready to set off again, continuing to scout farther to the north. Fun fact, the engine outline the Tatarin has is actually backwards, as on the BTRs the gearbox sits towards the middle of the vehicle. As I said, the Tatarin has a 260 horsepower turbo diesel V8, but some BTR models had two ZMZ 120 horsepower gasoline engines. I really wish I could find solid liter size and torque values for these engines, because I'm more curious about the mechanics of how those seemingly small engines manage to move a vehicle that can weigh nearly 15 tons unloaded, with a cargo allowance of another 5 tons, meaning this vehicle could weigh 40,000 pounds with all of its gear. Despite those weights, a well-maintained BTR could still achieve speeds of 50 miles an hour, although the Tatarin tops out at 19 miles per hour, making it the slowest vehicle in the game, tied with my beloved Azov 64131. While it may have a low top speed, it spends a lot of time at top speed because the Tatarin absolutely does not care. Whether it's mud, snow, rocks, or hills, nothing slows the Tatarin down. That feeling of constant momentum makes the Tatarin feel like easy mode to drive. But it can be easy to get overzealous with how much it can do, often wanting to just climb over things that end up in your way. Partially because you can, partially because it's massive and just saying screw it and trying to climb over what's in your way is easier than making a multi-point turn. Every time I get the dangerous water level warning in the Tatarin, I get upset, because it should be obvious, but its design is amphibious. The BTRs can go from ground to sea and vice versa, to cross small bodies of water, with a 9 mile an hour top speed. The Tatarin has everything modeled on it to be amphibious, but it definitely is not that. It has the port that would slide open to reveal a hydrojet propulsion unit. It has a surf breaker up front, which would be folded vertically to help it break through waves while getting from land to sea. It has a somewhat high-mounted exhaust and a high-placed intake, and it starts taking water damage before the intake is anywhere near water. although the intake and exhaust aren't high enough to be truly amphibious. As you can see here, a substantial amount of the BTR becomes submerged when in the water, needing large snorkels so the engine doesn't take on any water. This guy damaged his truck after delivering some wood to the point. He wants us to repair his truck and bring it back to him. That'll have to wait for a bit, but I passed a service trailer earlier that I may be able to make use of later. We made it to the point ourselves, a bit underwhelmed at it. A small farm with some beehives, and I believe some kind of bird stands. Hard to believe it produces much at all, but I suppose maybe that's all you need out here. So far, the Tatarin has made easy work of this trek into the frozen wilds. Of all of the scouts I could have picked for this journey, I'm glad it was you, and we have just under half a tank left. Let's use the FreeCam mod to poke around the interior a bit. Having the FreeCam mod is great. It allows me to unlock the camera in first person and view the interior, and here we can see something else the Tatarin is modeled with but can't actually do. To the left of the driver, there's this peculiar knob. Being as everything in this interior is Russian, I didn't expect to see the word deflate on it. I'm fairly positive this would be the controls for controlled tire pressure, allowing the BTR to deflate its tires to crawl through more difficult terrain. That would be a really neat mechanic in SnowRunner. It would help a lot for trying to climb up rocks. I do find it odd that this is one of the few instruments in the cockpit with English on it. This panel is located in front of the passenger and looks like it has AC controls on the bottom right. Controls for all the various light modes, the hazards, and a switch that looks like it has the symbol for a diff lock, although I can't imagine a situation where you wouldn't want, as well as what I think are symbols for tire deflation, or maybe just various drivetrain stuff. On the driver gauge cluster, we see several blank switches on the right side and 2 fan switches, maybe for more engine cooling or interior ventilation. On the left side, there's more blank switches, a switch for ABS, and a button with an outline of an engine with a T inside of it. I'm not sure what this button could possibly mean, and if it's in Russian, even less so. Back on our journey, I repaired that Zix we passed and was about to winch it to the drop point. As I was pulling it through this large puddle, I noticed that at barely any water level at all, the engine was getting put at risk. And on my route, there's a larger, most likely deeper, flooded road in my way. I'll need to get this thing over there on a flatbed, so for now, I set off on more scouting for the region, continuing on the road to the west to reach the cottage with the lighthouse in the north. The Tatarin, and by extension the BTR-80, is probably one of the more difficult vehicles to start this series off with. There's plenty of information out there regarding the BTR's combat capabilities, tactics, and what conflicts it participated in. But I had a hard time finding more mechanical information and fun facts, for lack of a better term, ones that were in English anyway. So I did the best I could with what I could find. But let's not forget, this video is also a review of the Tatarin in SnowRunner. And it is a beast of a scout, but its biggest weakness is its very low ride height. With as many wheels as it has touching the ground, you're very unlikely to get completely stranded by getting stuck on top of rocks, unless you're like me. The bigger issue is hitting the gas tank on the ground. Its gas tank is located nearly between the 2 rear axles. Everything from small rocks to uneven terrain to parking lot curbs will take this thing out. It does lack a lot of utility. It can't pull any trailers at all, so it's strictly a deep scouting or recovery vehicle. But with how easy it is to get this thing around, even without any upgrades, there's a good chance you'll have a hard time not using it once you find it. Whoever used to live here most likely tended this lighthouse. With the waters out here covered in ice and snow, the lighthouse was vital to ensure the ship captains could tell icy waters from snow-covered shore. Shame it sits abandoned now. Even more so that who sent us up here just wanted to see if the place was still standing so they could loot it. Such is life out here, I guess. If you made it this far into the video, check out this 8x8 circle jerk video I found while looking up random stuff about the BTRs. Shit's a banger. But yeah, If you made it this far into the video, I thank you. I hope you enjoyed this little adventure into the Tatarin and the vehicles it's based off of. What's your experience with the Tatarin? What's the weirdest way you've gotten it stuck? I would like to explore more of SnowRunner's trucks in this way, so if that's something you'd be interested in as well, please let me know. I would also appreciate any feedback on this format I'm trying, just because, you know. Till next time, legends, and remember, keep the shiny side up.